pinball isn't dead, it just smells funny. You ever heard of that?
No.
Yeah. Hello everybody. Something new today. We're going to do some in-depth interview with some people that for us are very important because they are working or worked in the industry of pinball. Next to me is Lori Jane Greene, and nobody knows her like that because her name is LJ.
Mostly
Everybody
LJ.
knows LJ. So LJ, she's an American. She lives in the Netherlands nearby, and she's married to, not married, she is going steady with a Dutch guy, with Bob.
I think your government says that we're fiscal partners. Isn't
Fiscal
that
partners,
romantic?
yes,
That's
yes,
very
that's a good
romantic.
construction. But LJ, in the 90s, she worked for the pinball companies like Premier, Gottlieb, and she has great stories to tell. And we're gonna talk about some kind of that stories. We don't know where it's going, how long it's gonna take, but enjoy, and it will be a blast. It will be awesome.
Awesome.
Welcome, LJ.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, living in the Netherlands,
I guess
how's
I've
that?
been living in the Netherlands is much better because you were here. No, I've been here for 14 years. It's great. The language is difficult to get into my head. Prior to coming here, I lived in Denmark for 14 years, and I find that the twee talen
Huh?
liggen dichter bij elkaar. Did I
Yeah,
say that right?
that's very
Okay.
good. Yeah.
So sometimes I confuse the languages,
Yeah.
but it's very nice to have the Pinball Museum just 20 minutes away because it always feels like coming home when you're coming here, especially because this guy was a former colleague. In fact, I learned everything about pinball from him in my very first
Yeah.
real job, which was at
Yeah.
Williams Bally Midway.
Yeah, it's Roger Sharp, and
It's Roger Sharp,
he's
yeah.
everybody's father. He's also my pinball father. He's the man in pinball. So I only knew him later because I was younger and I was into the hobby much later.
Yeah.
But you were in the center of the 90s where the magic things happened, and you were an employee of a company building pinball machines, and you didn't know about the industry. It was just a job for you.
No, it was in fact I back in those days you didn't even apply online. You would see an ad, and this was taken by a recruiter, and he wrote about a game company, and it sounded quite interesting. And it was for a market analyst, so the job was really to test games on location, and this would be right after. I want to say it was a year or two after Williams and Bally merged into one company. So Williams Bally Midway was all one company.
Yeah.
And I responded to the ad, and I went in for an interview, and it was nothing professional about it.
Yeah, but you were like 24, 25, 26?
I was like, yeah, really?
Yeah.
Never ask a lady how old she was. No, back
No.
then I was 25. I
25.
had just finished an internship in Denmark, and I went back to Chicago, and I was 25, and it was 1990, so that
Yeah.
gives you the, yeah. And yeah, so I went in for an interview, and they asked a lot of questions, and then I don't know what I said, but they said just hire her, and
Yeah.
then
You didn't say anything, just your looks said a name.
yeah, probably. In
Yeah.
the 90s, that was the thing. But
Yeah, Me Too
yeah.
didn't exist.
Me Too.
Me Too didn't
No,
exist.
actually, I have to say, because there were two sales guides for two different brands, and they both had to agree, and then it had to be written off by the Kenny.
Yeah.
But the funny part was at the end, they just said, hire her, let's go to Oinkers. I had an education as an actuary, so it was a little bit of overkill for game testing at the time, but I'm glad because it was a amazing first job, not just from the standpoint of they were trying to figure out what would hook a player to like the game, which is just when they were starting to come up with things like unique features like a Rudy
Yeah.
head that you would interact with,
From the funhouse.
that you would kind of lock balls in, and then what made it so that a player wanted to come back to that particular game. So defining fun and playability, that was something they were looking into or trying to quantify it.
Yeah.
So that was quite fun.
Yeah. That was nice because that was my start into into pinball because I was 16 when Funhouse came out.
Yeah.
And that attracted me. So what you thought of, that worked for me because I was the product. So I played because I liked the gimmicks that they put into the pinball machine.
They called it the hook. I think that
The
they were
hook.
saying, what was the thing that was going to hook the players?
Yeah.
And that what was really interesting at the time was part of the job was not only, okay, we had games and we had to put them on location, and we would always find that you put a new game on a location and it earns for a while, then it goes down for a bit.
Yes.
And then you would rotate the games, and that was always part of what the operator had to do in those days. But what was quite interesting was you'd have Steve Kordek, who was a legend,
A real
and he
legend.
was back, while the games were being adjusted. I guess there were Whitewoods. Is that the name?
Yes,
Yeah, for the
Whitewoods.
game
Yeah.
without artwork. I want to make sure I'm saying there were Whitewoods, and so we'd have to go back and play it. Especially people that weren't skilled pinball players,
Yeah.
and they'd watch us to see what was the game time, how fast did the ball drain,
Yeah.
how did they, and Steve would stand back there and read the statistics and then make small adjustments, little adjustments in the kinetics of the play field, or figure out if the ramp was as it needed to be. And they were actually quite interested in how the non-experienced player was shooting on a game,
Yeah.
as opposed to the designers, because they knew what they were supposed to do and we were just looking for flashing lights.
Yes. And talking about Whitewoods, who could have known that if you have that Whitewoods from back then now for a collector, that would be awesome. But they didn't exist because they didn't know that it was going to be, they were making history.
I guarantee you they didn't know that someone would make a museum here in Rotterdam,
Yeah.
and take all kinds of artifacts, you could say, and use them to decorate a museum. No,
Yeah.
that was never a thought. They were just works in progress. And
Probably Van Gogh or Rembrandt van Rijn didn't know that their painting is going to be in a museum also 400 years later, but you never know.
No.
But can you name some names who were your direct colleagues in the 90s?
Well, when I started, my boss was Joe Dillon. He was head of sales. Well, actually, it was Marty Glazman and Steve Blattspieler started, and then shortly thereafter, Joe took over sales for both of the product lines. And he was kind of a legend in that industry, I have to say. He had so many stories about the olden days, and he also tried to consolidate the distribution because there were distributors for Bally and distributors for Williams, and then he would put them all together. On top of that, we had Midway as a video game line, and they were just in the process of designing and developing Mortal Kombat 1, which would wind up kind of taking the company in a whole different direction. So but then we had a whole cast of characters in the design department. Steve Ritchie, Mark Ritchie, Python Angelo, and he would oftentimes just stop in the office and say random things.
You cannot say them now anymore, I think.
He's not around anymore, but
No.
yeah, I'm sure everybody who ever met Python Angelo
Yeah.
has a memory. He was
Hungarian roots, I think. Hungarian roots, Python Angelo?
Romanian, as far as I know.
Romanian.
He was Romanian, as
Yeah.
far as I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, Pat Lawler, Barry Ausler, Sheridan Ausler was Barry's younger brother.
Oh,
He was a character. Yeah, there was the thing about the pinball in those days. There was nothing bad about nepotism. If my own brother and I both worked in the company, yeah, my brother started he came as a person who would research the operator's experience of specific games. He came to Williams that way. Because I was in marketing research, so he was a contractor, and then he pitched the idea of making promotional videos, and then he started a whole promotional video department, and then he took over creative media, and I went somewhere else.
yeah.
But both Ritchie brothers worked there. We had numerous Nicastros in the building. So it was quite common that family members were there.
Yeah.
Were working within the office. There was nothing wrong about that at the time. Now I think nepotism is considered negative in companies, but that was it. Also gave the companies a family feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you also told me stories with Dennis Nordman was your colleague.
Dennis, yeah, of course.
George Gomez.
Dennis Nordman also helped me to learn how to play pinball, because he was, I remember him as being a guy who just loved crazy ramps.
Yeah.
I think he still does.
He still does. He's strangest cabinets. Love the guy.
Yeah.
But I don't know it in inches. But you are for America. You are a small woman.
I'm a small woman for
And Dennis
America,
Nordman
yeah.
is huge.
He's a very tall person.
He's Bigfoot. So
Yeah, he was Bigfoot. Yeah,
you
yeah.
literally look up to him, or
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and at the Williams Bally Midway place, it was at North California Avenue in Chicago. We always had a row of pinball machines, both in the back cantina or the cafeteria. We also had it in the testing area. And I remember because I was learning how to play pinball, and Dennis was also I don't know which one. I think he was in the process of designing Dr. Dude.
yeah,
I want
Dr.
to say
Dude,
that probably would have
yeah,
been the time.
yeah, our party animal, Dr. Dude,
Yeah,
Elvira, yeah,
it was after Elvira. I remember
Elvira,
that. Yeah.
yeah, it's a nice
And
story.
Greg Ferris was, of course, the artist.
Yeah,
Those guys were a team,
yeah.
and they always made, yeah, really colorful
Greg
creations.
Greg Forrest just announced his retirement, so all the guys,
Really?
you were a
Okay.
youngster and they were all a little bit old, so everybody's now is retiring from the business, probably.
Yeah.
Dennis Mortman is now 75.
It doesn't look it. Yeah, that's true.
He's a handsome man. Yeah, no. We just talked about Steve Kordek, and you mentioned Elvira. You have a great story about the Elvira.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
funny thing was I wasn't at the company when they released Elvira. However, I took over the desk of the person who was in marketing before me, and I found in the drawer a lot of photos, and one of them was Steve Kordek dressed as Dracula.
yeah,
And I learned that I don't, oh, is it here?
yeah. He's here.
Okay, this is, you got it here. You have all the props
Yes,
neatly laid out.
gonna do
This
something.
is still Steve Kordek dressed as Dracula, and that, as I'm told, was at the release of Elvira.
89.
But I remember also that he would come to trade shows, like always, with his daughter, who
Yeah,
apparently had also at a point in time worked for the company. Um, but he was, yeah, he was just a fixture.
yeah,
And one of the cool things was that while I worked there, I have to do it this way. Steve celebrated his golden wedding anniversary. I guess you'll do a close up of that later
yeah.
on. Yeah. And he brought everybody this adorable little giveaway that he did at his golden. This is for this says he was married in 1941. He had his 50th wedding anniversary in 1991, which is when I worked with him. And then he gave everybody a mirror with a wedding photo of
Yeah.
he and his wife when they got married. So that was quite
And you
cool.
donated it to our museum,
It is now
so
in your
we're gonna
and
put
he
it on
would love
display.
that.
Yeah,
He would love that somebody has taken all the
yeah.
time to do the research
It's pinball history.
about the
Yeah.
history of pinball in Europe.
So
That's huge.
he turned over 100 when he passed away, and
Yeah.
Wayne Nyans also passed 100. So what is it?
I guess they love
Yeah.
what they did for a living.
So
So you're going to be 110.
yeah, you're probably gonna do it also. We went to the expo last year, and you haven't been to the expo like 30, 35 years or
No,
so?
come
Yeah.
on.
And it was coming home for you, right?
Yeah, I haven't been to.
Everybody that you have seen, all your old colleagues were in shock that you see it. And what did they say? Do you have a fountain of youth in the Netherlands?
Yeah,
You
and
didn't age, and they did.
probably just all this good, clean living. We're a very good plastic surgeon.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank.
Or both.
Yeah. So,
So,
so you were in marketing. You are a data analyst. You did stuff, but you're also
so when I worked at Williams Bally Midway, I did the testing and I was a data analyst.
yeah.
And then Premier Gottlieb hired me to do their marketing.
Yeah.
And then that was quite an opportunity for me because I was in my late 20s. And for Williams Bally, the licensing was all done by Roger Sharp.
Of course.
And at Data East, the rock star of licensing was Joey Kamenkow. And he was working with Gary Stern. Those two were they were just, I think they had Simpsons. They had all the greatest licenses. And I think he was the first one to jump in. I think he even revived pinball. Data East did
Yeah.
by focusing on licensing. And then I had an opportunity to do it for Premier Gottlieb. So that was a dream job
A
for a
dream job.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, and let me explain why.
Yeah.
Because we were a limited amount of pinball manufacturers, and licensing in the 90s was a big part of the merchandising for any title, any movie release. And the icing on the cake for a licensing program was to also have a pinball machine. So there were more licenses going around than there were pinball companies that could develop them.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to pay that much for them, but they really wanted us. We had to develop them in accordance with the script of the company of the movie or of whatever license it was. But beyond that, it was so much fun
Yeah.
because they were selling to us, and
Yeah.
then we would choose what to develop.
Yeah, it's awesome. We're gonna talk about that stories a little bit later.
Yeah.
But your in-between job was also modeling for flyers, because he showed me
It
some
wasn't
flyers.
modeling for flyers.
Look
That
at
was
this. He
this. I
has,
was not. It was not
yeah,
a model for flyers.
yeah. We think,
This was actually no. This was the trade magazine at the
yeah.
time. So, as marketing person, which one is first?
We're
This
gonna
one's
show
first,
them
right?
both.
We're going to
Yeah,
show them both. Okay, so this we were not. This was not the flyer. This was the cover of Replay magazine,
yeah.
and every company would get one if you bought enough advertising. They would let your company be on the cover. I'm putting my yeah. I have my finger on top of my own face. But
Yes.
yeah, so this was the premier Gottlieb sales and marketing team,
So you
and
are
I was that one.
young LJ, and the other
I
guys.
was young LJ with lots of makeup.
Can you tell them who they are?
Yeah, of course. Let me do it with the one. Okay, so we have Gil Pollock, who is running the company. That's me. And then we have Mike Vretos, who did the operations and the production for the company. Over here, we have Steve Walton. And then on this one, we also have Steve Kaufman. So there were two Steves, a Gil and a Mike and myself. And we
Yeah.
were yeah. So, but this was, the trade magazine of the time was called Replay Magazine. So I wasn't modeling for flyers.
Yeah.
But we did have to buy advertising
Yeah.
in the magazine to get a cover. And this was this was the 30th anniversary? Well, no, that's only the 10th anniversary of Premier Gottlieb, but Gottlieb was longer as a brand in the marketplace. So
So when you went on having that job, more opportunities came along, and you were involved by licensing and really actually meeting the stars from the IP that were putting into the pinball. So, like for instance, Shack Attack or Waterworld. Just do it. The Waterworld story. Tell me something
yeah,
about.
the Waterworld story was nobody knew because they were investing so much in the movie, we were sure it was going to be a good license.
Yeah,
It turned out to be not a great
the
license.
biggest flop
That was
ever, but
I bought it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that was the case. But the studio was really doing a lot to merchandise it and to license it. And I remember we would get copies of the script to start with. And I remember reading the first scene of the script, and it didn't sound great.
oh,
The first scene written in the script was you probably will edit this out, I don't know. But written in the script was a guy alone on a boat, the Dennis Hopper character, who would then get pee into a
yeah,
machine, throw it into
yeah. Drink it.
something that would be clean, and then he would drink it.
Yeah,
And it didn't sound like a great opening scene.
no.
And they still, I think it was the opening scene.
Yeah,
It was a pretty bad open. But anyway, it sounded like a great idea for a pinball license, and they were putting so much money into it. How could it fail? And
yeah,
well, it did. But we did license it. Dennis Hopper did do the voice for it, and I got to for several films, I got to go with the sound engineer to record with the person who was going to do the voice. That was the case for Stargate with James Spader, and that was the case for Waterworld with Dennis Hopper. So
yeah.
that was,
You have a picture of.
yeah, but yeah, this is the picture. I don't think Dennis Hopper has a picture of him with me, but I have it.
Yeah, that's nice. So, but a great movie, one of the most expensive movies ever made in that time. The atoll that they were building, that was a huge, big of their budget. I
Yeah,
think it was a great movie, but it didn't hit the box office. But still, if you watch it now, I think it's an amazing movie. Pinball
yeah.
Machine, whatever, not that. It was a big success in that day, I
I think
think.
right that was right. This is right before a lot of companies started to go under, and the issue with pinball machines, and I've heard it also in several documentaries. Right then, in the mid '90s, was that video games were coming up so fast.
Yeah,
And playing a game on a screen in the 90s was like a new concept.
yeah,
I laugh about it because that's where we spend our whole lives on screens now. But back then, that was a new thing. It was also very lucrative for operators at the time to be able to put video games on location, and they didn't require much maintenance.
yeah,
And then they would earn a lot.
yeah,
But pinball machines, in order to keep them more and more exciting, we had to make them more intricate mechanically, and that required maintenance. That combined with the fact that in the US, still we don't really have a viable $1 coin, made it almost impossible. You always had to put a dollar bill
yeah.
acceptor into
Uh,
a pinball machine that also put it in any video game. It just made them unaffordable to maintain. So they almost
Yeah. There is this Susan B. Anthony coin.
there was
Yeah.
that didn't take off.
No.
No.
We have a great story to tell in this museum. That's for later. Yeah.
I might note that even back then, there was the American Association of Machine, the AAMA.
It's there, the Amusement and Music Operators Association. It's on the left of you.
No, that's AMOA.
Oh,
That's the operators.
Oh,
So the operators had their association, and then the machine manufacturers had their association, and that's the AAMA. And they were lobbying with the government of in the U.S. to get a $1 coin made, and that's been 30 years,
Wow.
and still that just in order to keep the industry alive. And now, of course, we have the card readers, and there's all different ways to play, but having just one quarter,
yeah.
it really limited. So the games were getting more and more expensive, but they weren't earning equally to what new video games were doing.
Yeah.
And to update a video game, you just had to change some,
Yeah.
some EEPROM. So, yeah.
So this like 95, even Steve Ritchie, guru into pinball, he left the company, he left the pinball business in 1995. I think the last one he made was No Fear. And he worked for Midway, and he was a developer for Mortal Kombat. You know that?
I knew he was a voice in Mortal Kombat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
if you ever
I didn't know
played
I didn't
Mortal
know,
Kombat,
I didn't know that he was on a development.
I don't know, but he worked for it. But he lent his voice
Yeah.
to the scene from "Finish him."
Yeah, he
That
did.
is Steve Ritchie.
There's a lot of crossover.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I loved about working in a game factory. So you would have there was a video team, and the Mortal Kombat team was a team of guys. I mean, they always ate lunch together, and some guys had futons in their offices. And the same with the pinball teams. The design teams, they got very close together. That meant they fought a lot, but they also came up with great things, because it was when you're creating together physically in one location, you just crazy ideas make it into the gameplay.
Yeah.
And so the guy who did the best voices was also Ed Boon of
Yeah.
Mortal Kombat fame, but he's the voice of Rudy,
Rudy, yeah.
because he could do crazy voices.
Yeah.
He could also, in those days when we would get on to page people in the
Yeah.
factory, you would get on the PA system by dialing a number. Ed Boon could take on almost anybody else's
Wow.
voice and page them to an office for no good reason.
Yeah. Wow.
He could just do an incredible amount of voices. So there's a lot of crossover between the creatives in pinball and the creatives in video games,
Yeah.
and that was super fun. Yeah.
Amazing, yeah. So, you also have a great story about Shaquille O'Neal. And
Yeah.
it's Shaquille O'Neal
I'm gonna-
pin
Yes.
pinball machine, and you went to his house. You met him.
Yes. So when he got a pinball machine for his house once it was developed. And so we were fortunate enough, together with the distributor for the region, we could deliver to his house. At the time, he played for the Orlando Magic, and we got a tour of his house. But and that tour included the whole house. It was quite funny, because some of the people working in his house were friends of his from university. And then we get to see that he had, I must have been like a 8 foot in diameter round bed in his bedroom.
Yeah,
I'm
he's a
gonna
tall
keep
guy.
it clean. So I must have looked panicked when I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
can-
he's a tall guy. Yeah.
He's
So
a tall
we
guy.
got to see
Yeah.
that. That was quite.
And we also have a picture of it. We're gonna put it.
We'll edit it in
Yeah.
when
Edit it in. Yeah, nice.
But
Yeah.
But what was interesting was that when licensing games, we also did the Big Hurt, which was Frank Thomas. He was baseball player for the Chicago White Sox at the time. He had been, and when we would license a sports figure or license a character from a movie, oftentimes whoever was involved wanted to get involved in the design of the movie. They wanted also to personally approve the artwork, and they always wanted to have a game themselves. So that was quite fun.
Yeah. And also, nobody knows this, But the big hurt pinball machine, Frank Thomas is the player on the.
Frank Thomas was the player.
We don't know anything about baseball, so I have to.
Yeah, the baseball doesn't really sell.
But there's
in
also
Europe.
a character this small in the translite in the backlist. That was your boyfriend.
Yeah, he was on deck, so you always put the player on
Yeah.
deck. And he was Frank Thomas's trainer at the time. His name was Walt Pasternak, and we put him in the screen in the back glass.
Yeah.
And so yeah, at the time I was dating Walt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
real famous.
I think he's gone on to have a fabulous life,
Oh,
despite that we didn't work out.
yeah. Yeah. So, we went to the expo last year, and I observed you from a distance, and everybody was thrilled that you were there.
Oh, thank you.
I saw everybody glinting in their eyes, but they also arranged something for you, so you have to get on stage.
Yeah.
And you were now how do you call that? You were put into the Pinball Hall of Fame. You will get a reward and a
for
plaque.
service to the industry,
Yeah.
apparently. So they gave me a plaque, and I had to make a speech. You were there.
Speech.
That was a big surprise. I didn't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
You convinced me to go, so I went. But it was one of the greatest feelings of also your first job and the way you know people from those days. And what I find to be quite interesting is a lot of the people that started in pinball stick around the industry
Yeah.
for a long time, and they're authentic. Since then I've moved to a few countries, and I've changed to some industries were great, like show lighting was a fabulous industry. Software was a more of a it was more you meet a lot of people, but you don't maintain really solid authentic connections with very many people that you work with. But in pinball and in gaming generally, people were who they were who they were then, and they maintain that way. And a lot of, because the industry has done this,
Yeah.
a lot of their life stories have been, I think
Yeah.
we heard from Chris Granner, who was also inducted into the Hall of Fame, and he did a lot of music that, pinball basically saved his life.
Fist Steels, everybody know the Fist Steels tunes.
Yeah.
Chris Granner, yeah, it was awesome. And I saw real tears.
You saw real tears.
Yeah, you cried when you, yeah, because
Yeah,
it felt, I think, if for you it felt like a warm bath. You're coming home.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you said to me, how about I started my my working career in pinball. How about closing it? So if they ask you, do you want a job in Europe, you do something in marketing or something, they can call you, right?
Of course. But I'm on a quest. I have a thing, because just as I got to, because my company was a place where I would go. Now people work remotely and they don't really have those organic creative moments with colleagues. And I think that to the extent that people do go into the company at least once a week, talk to their colleagues, they do better work, they have a better motivation. I would love to see more corporations have game rooms and have, like, a pinball area or a game area. So my quest would be to increase the number of physical locations where we could put pinball machines, and not necessarily always so that they're earning. They don't always have to be in some environment. They could be on free play in a company game area.
Yeah.
I would love to see that, because I think that people who are going in have the same experience that I can share with you now about my first job, which was, I had Steve Kordek, a legend, sitting there watching me play and telling me stories about why the flippers were put in that location on a pinball machine. And there's a history and a legacy there, and you miss that now if you work remotely.
Yeah. So Harry Mapps invented the flipper in 1947. There were 6 on the side. You can shuffle the ball from the left to the right. But later it was in another position, and it still is there. And they, when the things were here, they never changed it, because they knew it was correct. It's very nice. So they got a lot of involvement into the history of pinball, but always the flippers remain the same into a pinball machine. But for now, these days, we got, like, we started with the electromechanical machines, and later from 77 we got the PCBs. It evolved, but it's still pinball. It's still with a ball, with flippers, and it's an amazing game. I think that the policy, we have to fact check that, but still it's a policy with Stern that every employee has to play for 15 minutes a day.
It's really
And
good.
maybe not on the factory, but
Yeah.
all the designing crew play pinball because, yeah, if for instance for me, I'm running a museum. I don't play 15 minutes a day because I don't have the time for it. But I wish
You
I could.
could.
I could.
There are plenty of opportunities around.
Plenty of opportunities, but there's always something that is blowing. Is something in my mind. It has to be. Pinball is such an amazing thing, and we also do a lot of pinball machines for companies because why we loved it. But I always pitch the idea to companies that if you have so much on your head with the most difficult stuff that you have to do for a business, play a game of pinball, 50 minutes, and your head is empty.
Yeah, that too. But one of the things that I also notice is that, and who knew? You're back when, as I mentioned, when pinball was coming, was when I worked in pinball, and we also had video games. It was kind of a new thing to have a game on a screen.
Yeah.
From then to now, we spend just hours on screens. Hours on screens. And then, of course, you can still play a game on a screen, and I do. Like, I do it on my phone if I'm waiting. But the idea of things actually moving, and you actually have to react, and there's actual sound, and just the whole 3D effect.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in a computer, if you're in an office where you're working all day on a computer, you're having a conference calls, your whole life takes place,
Yeah.
talk, just basically on a screen, documenting things on a screen, meeting on a screen. It really clears your mind if you can just focus on keeping a ball moving on a playfield
Yeah.
in real,
It's
and
awesome.
yeah, anything you do that it doesn't involve screen time nowadays is yeah, it's a good micro break. I think there is a term. It's called a micro break.
Okay. Micro
Yeah,
break. Yeah,
it's called a
it's
micro
good
break.
term.
Yeah,
We introduce it.
I
Micro
tell you
break.
to go for a walk in the
Yeah.
middle of the day. Yeah.
So a couple of weeks ago, you were visiting family in Chicago, I think.
Yeah.
And you also had lunch with George Gomez.
George
Yeah.
Gomez.
How was
Yeah.
that? You don't have to fill in the details, but how was that? Just lunch. I have a dream. I want to have lunch with George Gomez.
You want George Gomez to
One on
come
one.
here to do an evening with
Yeah.
George Gomez.
I even fly over for lunch with
Yes,
George
yeah, yeah,
Gomez.
yeah,
But you had a lunch.
yeah,
Yeah. What do you
yeah.
have?
Well, what do we eat? Well, right across from the Stern factory, where they have now, it's in Elk Grove Village. They're going to put a giant pinball up there
Okay.
that should be, everybody who knows the Chicago bean. Well, Elk
Yep.
Grove Village is now going to have its bean, and that's a
Really?
giant pinball. It's going to be in front of the Stern factory. And then
Oh.
across the street, there's a nice restaurant over there. But we talked about the history of pinball and also the changes that have happened. Because Stern, Data East at the time it was called, but Stern today and Gary Stern, and that story is so, to me, it's the best example of Chicago resilience. Chicago's a city that almost burned down once, and then people stayed and they rebuilt the city, and it has high rises.
Yes.
I don't know how many times Stern should have gone under.
Yeah.
There are several times that even Gary's dad started a company that might not have survived,
No.
and then it became Data East, and then it became Sega, and now it's Stern Electronic, and that is the one company still standing, or the one team, I guess, say, person, still in the industry that was there from when I was there,
Yeah.
and never. Premier Gottlieb, they went bankrupt. Williams Bally Midway stopped their pinball production. But Stern lived on.
Yeah.
So, and that's,
Yeah.
you're fortunate enough to be able to host him here.
Yeah, maybe
And
we're working on it.
You're working on it,
Yeah.
okay?
Yes, we did it. We have a date with Gary for a night at the museum. Tickets are limited, and this is a one-time opportunity to meet the man who kept pinball going. So, but everybody calls Roger Sharp the man who saved pinball. But
Yeah.
I think Gary Stern is the man who earns the title, the man who kept it going.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
because
were lots of good reasons that
Yeah.
pinball should have gone under, and it didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it's amazing also.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, but let's not forget Jersey Jack Pinball.
yes.
It was started in 2010, and everybody has competitors. And from my point of view, they weren't competitors. They raised the bar. So Jersey Jack was coming with the Wizard of Oz, and Stern said, "We're gonna top it." So and now these days, these days, like for 10, 15 companies building pinball machines these days.
Yeah.
And that's enormous. And we also have a Dutch company making Big Lebowski, and they're gonna announce the new title later this year or beginning of the next year.
Yeah.
So pinball is alive. There was once a phrase in pinball, and it always was in my mind. Pinball isn't dead; it just smells funny. You ever heard of that?
No.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, it still smells funny, but it's a nice smell. It's not like a candy, weet je, or something, or yeah, something. But pinball is really alive, and we are working also. We have a museum because I like what I like to have a museum and to tell about the stories, but also I want to keep it alive.
But
Yeah.
no, can I just turn the tables for 1 second and ask you a question? I know that you liked pinball,
Yeah.
but you had a whole nother profession.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you were painting.
I was a painter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's for 25 years painting houses, whatever, and I really loved my job. Yeah, you can be creative, but also you can your mindset can go somewhere else and do your job because it's work. It's not you don't have to have a degree for it, something like that. Just do it
Yeah.
and work on it. But it also helped me going building this business. So I earned some money, I bought a pinball machine, and bought another and another and another, and it
What was
grew.
the first one you bought?
That was when I was 14. That was in 1988. It was the Williams Grand Prix
Wow.
electromechanical
Wow.
game.
Okay.
Yeah, probably Steve Kordek game.
Wow.
He built
Okay.
one more than 100.
That's
So
before they would even put the designers' names on the plate,
yeah.
right? Yeah. That's
So
really cool.
I was a painter, and I was into the pinball, and I started a renting pinball for rent company,
Right?
and that's how we met. You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So the Netherlands isn't this big, but
What game were you renting? Was that a
yeah,
ghetto?
no, that was two Ritchie games,
It was
Mark
a Ritchie,
Ritchie
yeah,
games and a Steve Ritchie game. This was No Fear and Fistils.
It was a Fishtails. Okay,
Yeah.
it was Fishtails.
And it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
in Limburg. That's like a 2.5 hour drive. I don't know. And there was een of andere just venue, big venue, and they wanted to have pinball machines on their stand. And I put it there, and when I went back, I get a call from some LJ. How is it possible? I was working in the industry, and now there are two Ritchie games on the floor, and blah blah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how we met.
Yeah. That's
And 10 years ago, we organized a meet and greet with Steve Ritchie.
exactly 10 years ago.
Yeah, and
I have the placemat.
yeah, the placemat.
You made a
Yeah.
photo of a placemat.
And it was a meet and greet, not just meeting someone with the meet and greet. And people said I was a little bit dyslexic, but it wasn't. It was really a meet and greet, having a dinner with some meat, and it was fun. But Steve Ritchie was there, you were there, and yeah, that was also a very special moment. 10 years ago.
That was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Was it, and then the following year, was it Roger Sharp that came, or was he from the previous year?
No, they were 2018 with
Okay.
Jack Deze, and I already started the museum
Yeah.
in another venue in Rotterdam. And now we are for 9 years a museum, and every year it's exponentially it grew. So and
Yeah.
now we are here talking with people from the
And the
industry.
number one, I can plug your museum.
Yeah.
The number one museum on TripAdvisor in Rotterdam.
Yeah,
is
we got a lot of
Mischa.
museums
Yeah.
in Rotterdam with paintings from old masters. Yeah,
There's
some.
a lot of
Yeah,
museums.
yeah.
The Maritime Museum, the Boymans Museum.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So why is that? Because everybody loves pinball, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So you cannot harm anybody. It's just if you're not into pinball, yeah, you have a problem. We
Yeah.
don't have a problem. You have a problem. Who
No,
doesn't
but
like pinball?
you're not just a location where people can play games. You're showing the innovation behind the game, from bagatelle forward when the flipper came on. You have a huge collection of
History,
molds,
yeah.
artifacts, original artwork, everything
Really
here. So
creating history.
yeah,
Yeah. So
so that yeah, I think it blows people away when they come here. Yeah.
I actually, I don't say I invented the word, but it came to my mind. Why is a museum? Because a museum is like a word that people say, hands on your back, looking around, don't touch anything. So I came up with the following name for our museum. I'd rather call it a museum.
A museum, that's upstairs. The museum's downstairs, right?
Yeah.
And then upstairs is a museum where you can
Yeah.
play.
Museum?
Yes, that's cool.
Museum. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you talked about your brother. I think he's living in Spain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and hopefully he'll be here in a month's time so he can
Oh,
come and visit
yeah.
you. He's got all the stories behind, well, not all the stories, but quite a few stories behind the making of the promotional videos, which were a new thing in the 90s.
Yeah.
So he pitched that idea to Williams Bally Midway and then stayed and ran a department called Creative Media, where it was kind of a new thing. I remember I asked him yesterday because I called him on the phone to prepare for this.
Ah,
What was the first video he made? And it was about the new operating system. So it wasn't a promotional video at all. And that went out to all the distributors and operators so they understood the new operating system. That would have been around, like, I want to say 91. And
okay.
then I know he made a video with Roger Sharp and I think Mark Ritchie for Slugfest.
Ah, yeah,
That
game.
that was one of the early
Yeah.
ones because that was not a standard pinball machine, so that was a promotional. And then it became that it was a part of the launch package for every video game that came out. And those I know are on YouTube. I also know the original footage for a lot of what he shot for those was sent by Ken Fedesna, who was running Williams Bally Midway when they stopped pinball
Ken
production. Shut
Fedesa, that
down.
is the
Yeah,
big
Ken
boss.
Fedesna.
Yeah, I met him last year on the expo.
You did,
Yeah.
and you'll meet him next year.
Yeah. Oh,
But he sent all the original footage to a game museum in New York somewhere.
okay.
So all that, yeah. But yeah, so hopefully he's got other stories. But
Yeah. Does he have all the footage? Because we can
the footage, a lot
digitize
of the
it.
footage is in that museum, but according to Kenny, everything that they digitized, we should have access to.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 I remember the Fish Tales promotional video, I think.
Yeah, that was shot at Gages Lake in Illinois. And that was also an early one.
Yeah.
That was early in the
Yeah. So another story that came to my mind. So we went to your stack of photos and flyers.
Oh yeah,
It
what
was
a
the Stargate game. You also did the licensing.
yeah, we
of-
licensed Stargate.
You met the
The voice of Stargate was James Spader.
James Bay. Yeah.
James Spader, yeah. And we went to a recording studio where he had done the looping for the film. And what I do remember was that yeah, the what you have to read for James Spader's an actor.
Yeah.
And then we have him saying things like "shoot the ramp for million." I mean, it's
Shoot the pyramid. Shoot the
and
pyramid.
I remember him actually like just going, "I
Yeah.
can't believe I have to say this." Not that the concept of Stargate was ever his favorite,
Yeah.
and he was pretty public about that in his interviews. But but then he had to but he wanted the pinball machine, so he
Yeah.
did get the pinball machine.
I think the Stargate is one of the best Gottlieb's made in that area.
Yeah.
Only the most annoying thing about playing Stargate is that it's always shoot the pyramid, shoot the pyramid, shoot the pyramid.
What was this? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you also received a gift back then.
Yes, I got the watch. I think it had Horus or Anubis in it.
Yeah.
What is
Yeah,
that?
that's the doorbell.
Oh, that's a nice doorbell.
No, but she managed it. But you get a wristwatch.
Yeah, I got a wristwatch, and so now that sits in the museum as
That's
well.
in the museum
So
on display.
as I find things, and if yeah, all anything that I find that I think is noteworthy for any game or any license or anything will go in this museum because
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
it should. I think the one story we also did at Premier Gottlieb, we also did Rescue 911.
Yeah.
And now I was researching that title for this.
William Shatner.
I have a William Shatner story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
I did have a William because I was researching. I know that William Shatner had a game delivered to his house. I'm 100% sure of that. And in fact, preparing for this, I went to find out why. Because when I look at the game on Wikipedia, it says that it was missing William Shatner. I don't think we had the rights for his likeness, but I think he did voice prompts for the game.
Yeah.
And that was released years later. I found myself in a situation where I happened to, I was visiting somebody who knew, well, I was invited to a dinner hosted by one of the founders of Priceline, where the next day they were shooting some Priceline commercials. And I happened to be at a dinner with William Shatner, and I thought, what do you say to William Shatner? I never met the man.
Yeah.
I just know that he had a pinball machine in. So I asked him, do you have a Rescue 911 and pinball machine? And he confirmed that he did.
Ah.
He also
Wow.
confirmed that the helicopter didn't work.
Ah.
So
Wow,
that was quite
nice.
fun.
Yeah.
That was, yeah.
So this was a nice one taker, I think.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
did we get enough in?
Yeah,
Yeah, like if I can come up with anything else.
yeah. So we're gonna
You
close
can,
it.
you a lot you can edit, I'm
Yeah.
sure.